The final part and topic for the 101 series is control effects. Basically, everything you do that's offensive, and in a few cases even defensive, will control your enemies. When you throw power over time, when you throw debuff, when you regenerate power with your weapon, all of those actions control enemies automatically. It is something that you cannot turn off while in controller stance, because it's one of your primary functions. Control effects are labeled in your combat log, and you can see them isolated if you have enabled the combat out option. They can be labeled as stunned, rooted, knocked back, knocked down, pulled, trapped, panic, etc. Only a few are shown above the enemy's head. Stunned and rooted are always shown above your target's head. Just to recap, remember you need to reach or slightly surpass the suggested amount of dominance located in the on-duty queue-up menu. Why? So that your dom is higher than an NPC's willpower, which will let you physically control all the NPCs that are programmed to be controlled in an instance. NPCs that have very little or no willpower can be controlled by any role with little or no dom. You see this often in solos, duos, and open world content. If you forgot what willpower is, it is an invisible stat that NPCs have that allows them to resist our control effects. Any power that controls NPCs in raids or alerts while a player has none to very little dom often means that power is broken. That's just a rule. An example is currently Nature's Harvest. However, this excludes power interaction consumables which you can craft. Keep note of what I mentioned in part 2 about dominance. Every 500 points of dom will increase the duration of a stun, root, levitation, or encasement by 1 second, or 2 milliseconds every 1 point of dom. This mechanic only applies to those 4 control effects, not panic or knockdowns, etc. It also only applies to power control effects, not control effects done by your weapon. Some roots are actually broken in-game too, so keep that in mind. This mechanic mainly applies to controllers since tanks don't actually apply a stun effect. They mainly knock back, knock down, juggle, pull, you get the idea. Only ice can actually root or encase. All controller stuns have a base duration of 15 seconds. Throw current dom values and you can start controlling these NPCs for longer than 20 seconds. You may wonder why, if your dominance is so high, why is it you can't control all the NPCs in the instance? Or why do the NPCs break out and you just can't seem to control them for 15 seconds? There are actually a few reasons, so bear with me. These reasons were gathered from testing over the course of 5 years by my gadget author predecessors, myself, Penrin, and even info shared with me directly from DCUO developer Locke. First, some NPCs have breakout profiles. What is that? Locke shared they, quote, used to make the NPC behave like players a little better. It determines when and why NPCs break out. So we have many different profiles, end quote. It's important to know that NPCs with no breakout profile do just that. They don't break out of your control effects, and they don't gain immunity. They can be controlled for 15 or more seconds depending on your dominance. They're found in solo, duos, alerts, and some raids. Most instances have at least one type of this NPC. There's so many I could list, but keep in mind if you find these, it's best to have the controller stun them. Your tank will save power if they remain suppressed, just because controller stuns can last 10 times longer than the tank's knockdown effect. Knockdowns last around 2, sometimes 3 seconds. And just to repeat, tanks don't actually stun. I am aware of most of the NPCs that don't break out, so if you're curious who they are, at your current tier level, just ask me. Back to NPCs with breakout profiles. The time you have available to control them depends on their profile, and it varies across the NPC population, which is a lot. A lot. Some can be controlled for 2 or 3 seconds, then they break out. Some can be controlled for 8 seconds and then they break out. So pay attention to these enemies in content. It'll help you when it comes to reviving or performing objectives. The moment the first control effect lands is what starts a countdown. It could be any control effect, so it can be from a tank, a controller, a broken power, a PI consumable like chrono emitters and dazing device, or even weapon control effects. Once the control effect registers on the NPC, the game starts counting down to when the NPC will break out. So if an NPC profile is programmed to break out in 3 seconds, let's say a tank casts a pull, or a controller throws pot, which also stuns, and then 3 seconds later the NPC becomes immune to any and all control effects. but during that countdown, any and all control effects will register on the NPC. So during that cooldown, you could spam more pulls, more stuns, more pushes, whatever, all which will register on the NPC until, again, the cooldown is over. That's provided the control effects you're throwing on top of the current control effects aren't prominent. By that I mean some effects will actually overwrite others because of the way their animations are designed, like Quantum's Tachyon Burst, Anomaly, and Distortion Wave. Although they may look amazing and dominant, they last exactly the same as other stuns and CEs. And CEs I'll just use just to shorten control effects. Again, their animation design just allows them to take priority over other animations, and that's why you see them stick out. It's also the reason why you can't physically pull NPCs in that animation. It's just the way that the animation is programmed. The same applies to munitions net launcher animations, and there's 2 of them in that power set. You just have to wait until the animation is over. The same goes for NPCs that break out after 8 seconds or any other duration. If you want to be a great controller, you have to pay attention to these NPCs while you power heal. It is a lot to take on, but why am I telling you to do this? Because doing so will allow you to catch threats early. You can warn the team and make quick moves on revives and switch hits. You can also act and prevent NPCs from reaching their objectives, like the Totem Masters in the Throne of the Dead raid, and the Kryptonians planning to escape in the last boss fight of the Phantom Zone Alert, as well as the Kryptonian troopers in the first boss fight against Zod in the Science Spire. With some NPCs, you can actually prevent group wipes by controlling them during their special attack, their skull attack, like the Reavers in the corridors of Brainiac's bottled ship. That's just to name a few. Some NPCs, for example, in the Kondak raid, like the Jackal soldiers, stay stunned for 2 seconds, stay immune for around 8 seconds, and then apply self-breakouts automatically while in combat for 4 seconds every 25 seconds. Wing armors in the Outer Batcave raids can now be controlled, but they also grant themselves a regular breakout while they perform a special skull attack. These are just examples. There are many, many more NPCs out there, and they all vary in when and how they break out. This is just something you have to pay attention to in NPCs. So I can't literally make an entire video or list on them. It's just something that once you figure out the foundation and the basics, you'll be able to know what to look out for. Some NPCs have breakout profiles. What happens after they break out? They become immune. There are 3 kinds of immunity. NPCs can gain temporary immunity to being controlled by weapon combos, and obviously your powers. When they are immune to these, they flash white. That flashing white immunity duration also varies, but it's usually anywhere from 2 seconds, and sometimes it goes up to 8 seconds depending on the NPC, and I gave 2 examples of those already. The 3rd type of immunity comes from the NPCs who successfully combat counter you. Some, not all, but some will gain temporary immunity to being controlled, and they flash blue. For each case, you just have to wait until the flashing ends. Then you can control the target. That applies to tanks as well. They just have to wait. Spamming pulls won't physically bring the ads over to them while they are immune. Sometimes the flashing will end, and you will not be able to control them, but you'll see an indicator above their head, and it's a word. If you cannot see the flashing because of multiple animations going off, look for the words immune or resist above the NPC. When the control effects from your power or weapon cannot register on the NPC, you will see resist. That happens when they flash white, or if another control effect is already registered. The words immune work the same, but sometimes just appear when the NPC is programmed to be immune in general, or if the NPC is immune to a specific control effect. An example is in Fortress of Solitude 3, the Sunstone Matrix. The red and gold sentries cannot be stunned, so you'll often see the word immune above their head. However, they do register knockdown and knockbacks. This is also something you may want to keep an eye out for in future content. One last bit of info that can determine whether you can control NPCs are their ranks. A higher rank usually means more health, higher damage out, and more resistance to being controlled. At the bottom there are chumps and minions, which mostly are controllable for a long period of time, like 15 or more seconds depending on your dom, because they do not break out. They have no breakout profiles, but some do, and they will break out. but that's after something like 8 seconds. Those are found in raids. Each raid and alert has various profiles for these chumps and minions. In solos, duos, and some raids, they do not break out at all. But that's mostly in like solos and duos. They have a higher percentage of appearing in mobs, and they're often the smaller ones in size. Above that is a match. A change from a minion to a match means that NPC can be combat countered, and it can combat counter you. Combat counters include block breaks, interrupts, and blocking. Successfully pulling off a combat counter means that NPCs can be immune to control effects for a short time. It doesn't apply to all of them though. Matches are controllable in content, but they break out much earlier than chumps or minions. Depending on the raid you're in, they can break out after 3 seconds of when the first control effect lands on them, or up to 8 seconds after the first control effect lands on them. Matches usually have varying percent ranges on when they appear in mobs. For example, in the Amazon Fury 2 DLC, they had a 13% chance of showing up in mobs. There, these matches were Punishers and Bowmasters. Next are sub-bosses, which are actually not in raids. That was confirmed to me by Locke. They are controllable and some do break out. The top one is Boss, which you cannot control in raids or alerts. However, in solo and duo content, you can control some bosses. No matter what your dominance is, you cannot control bosses in raids or alerts because they are programmed to resist your control effects indefinitely. Locke did mention to me that there are more ranks that they use for different types of NPCs, but these are the general ones they use often. Just to finish up, just allow the tank to physically pull all the NPCs first into their tank zone so the NPCs don't gain immunity right away. Keep note that if the NPCs are immune to control effects, the tank can still taunt them. If you want to get an idea of how big the size of a tank zone is, just go to the 8 sparring targets in your league hall and look at the formation and distance of those sparring targets from each other. Once the tank has the NPCs in their zone, do whatever. If the tank is extremely slow, you can be aggressive, but normally if you have a smart tank that knows how control effects work and all that, they won't feed you BS. If you have any questions on this topic specifically, you can definitely leave comments or message me on the forums. Once you feel you have a clear understanding of part 1, 2, and 3, I recommend you move on to my next video series titled Controller Role 102. It will be more advanced, so you want to make sure you have a solid foundation on the basics first.